Good morning. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathered and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting of the 18th of May. I declare this meeting open at 9 a.m. and I would like to advise attendees that we're going to adjourn the meeting so that we can get our live streaming and audio recording technology in place. Councillors, I'd like to move that the meeting be adjourned for 10 minutes to reopen at 10:09. Councillor Lane has seconded that motion. Can I please see a show of hands for support for that motion?
Can I just correct, was that 10:09 or 10:09?
10:09, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kerensky. That is carried unanimously. The meeting is now closed until 10:09. Alrighty, councillors, the time is 10:09 and I would like to move that the meeting be reopened at 9:10 a.m. Can someone please second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Welcome again to the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting of the 18th of May 2021. The meeting was reopened at 9:10 a.m. and I'd like to advise meeting attendees that this meeting is being audio recorded for the time being, and as soon as we can get the technology sorted out, we will live stream the video as well. I would like to move that I've received a leave of absence from Councillor Russell. Can I please have someone move that absence be accepted? Thank you, Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Lane. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillors, I note that there are items on the agenda that are confidential. While the public live streaming / audio recording of the meeting will be turned off during the closed sessions, a motion has been prepared to confidentially audio record all closed sessions. As the Local Government and Committee Meeting Code does not have provisions for the recording of confidential discussions at this time, a motion must be resolved before we can proceed with confidential audio recording. This is due to councillors expressing an interest in improving the accountability of our decision making by keeping a record of confidential discussions to allow for the review and understanding of decisions made on confidential matters in the future. I note that the proposed motions are as follows and will be put on the screen shortly. One, that in accordance with 7.11A6 of the Local Government Committee Meeting Code, the provision of live streaming set out under section 12.3 of the Meeting Code be suspended for the duration of the closed sessions of the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting held on the 18th of May 2021 for the purposes of audio recording the closed sessions for Council's internal confidential use only. And that two, that the confidential audio recording of the closed sessions of the Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting held on the 18th of May 2021, as detailed in Clause 1 above, be deemed confidential and be treated as such in accordance with Sections 171 and 200 of the Local Government Act 2009, and that the recordings remain confidential. Is there a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Second, yes.
On the screen it actually says 19th of May and today's the 18th, isn't it?
Thank you very much, Councillor Fraser. We'll make that correction and you can second the motion for your good service. Excellent. You will see the 18th of May on the screen shortly. Councillor Murphy has moved. Councillor Fraser has seconded. All in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Here we go. Councillors, I now refer to item 4.1, which is a deputation from Invest Logan. While I note that the deputation report itself is not confidential, there are confidential elements and a confidential presentation. So initially, I will give councillors the opportunity to hear from the open parts, which essentially refers to the constitutional changes that Invest Logan are requesting. And you're welcome to ask questions on that. And then once we move into the strategic and financial matters, we'll move into confidential for that presentation. I'll now hand over to the Manager of Economic Development and Strategy, Mr. Dave Radich, to speak to the report.
Through the Chair, good morning, councillors. It's my pleasure to introduce Susan, Medi and Stephen Greenwood for Invest Logan. They're going to speak to us about some of the details in the report, how they're performing, their quarterly performance and some of the constitutional changes. So I'll now hand over to Medi to speak to the report.
Oh, thanks very much, and thanks for having us again, councillors. We've got two sections here. One is the confidential, one is the public. So I'll just commence with the Constitution and the change to the Constitution. Once we've gone through that, I guess we'll then field some questions and then go into our report via our presentations. In the pack, we're seeking to amend the Constitution back to where it was originally in 2017. After the establishment, there is just going through a brief history. After the establishment of Invest Logan, a governance review was undertaken, and that was in December 2018. Those changes related to executive directors, effectively, including the removal of the definition and clause 53, for which you have a briefing. The rationale for the change was to reflect the way that Invest Logan was initially intended to operate and perform. With the recent reset of our strategy, and we'll actually present the strategic framework which we took away from our session with the councillors last year, the board has reviewed the company's ability to deliver on that strategic intent. We're now seeking, on behalf of the board, comfort for Invest Logan's business continuity, that the ability to draw on the non-executive directors to fill in executive director roles. It's proposed that the Constitution be altered to reinstate what we had originally based on the current strategic intent. And we're also looking at, whilst retaining the ability, which is effectively a managing director, also retaining the ability for a CEO.
Thank you, Medi. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. I did read the report. The changes were made as a result of a governance review. Do we have an actual governance confirmation that this is okay by the branch in terms of changing this back? Is that something that we've looked at doing? I know that I wasn't here as a councillor when this review was undertaken, but my understanding was it was a very comprehensive review and it was done for a specific reason. I just can't see anything that points to changing that back. Governance reviews aren't done lightly, and I imagine you don't come here lightly asking for the change. So I was just curious as to whether or not you'd run that by our governance branch and there was clearance from them. Yeah,
look, thanks for the question. We've presented it. We've also presented it to the ELT. We're seeking feedback. We've undertaken our own review prior to presenting this to the committee, but we're awaiting, obviously, Logan City Council's review on that.
Thanks, Mr Chair. I'm not comfortable making a decision without that.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Any further questions? I've got some if no one else does. Cool. Medi. So why was the Constitution changed in the first place?
I believe at that stage there was the view, again this was pre my time, but my belief is that the Constitution was changed because we had an incoming CEO and it was also in line with the original intent of Invest Logan. Now that we have a board which is quite a small board, we also want the ability to have one of the executive directors the non-executive directors take on an executive director role. And that's purely from a business continuity perspective, as we've said before.
Could we not just appoint more board members?
We could appoint more board members. That is a possibility.
And what's the benefit to the shareholder?
The benefit to the shareholder is the intent, the detail and the experience based on the outgoing, myself, non-executive director, to the CEO role back on the board.
Okay.
So specifically, the rationale from a non-executive director to an executive director is around the specific skill sets that one brings to the board and then going back into the company to run it. Yeah.
So if you would be CEO and on the board, you would bring reports to the board and then have voting rights on the reports that you've brought out of the organisation?
There is a separation there, Mr Chair, so certainly anything that is of conflict or something that I as the CEO bring forward to the board, I would not be voting at all.
but you'd be involved in creating the report and making decisions otherwise? Thanks, Steve. Mr. Greenwood.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, and good morning, all. Yeah, look, one of the main reasons. Look, I'll answer your council specifically, Councillor Raven. One of the challenges in and so what we've done as a board is that one of the main drivers for this is over the last 12 to 18 months is that there's been a lot of changes in Invest Logan, and through that. And we're a very lean organisation, so we've got so in terms of our officer level, we don't have any backstops. So if someone leaves or changes, we're actually, we're always going to be lean because that's, we've got to keep our costs down. So one of the approaches that they're seeking here is the ability to put in place one of a board director for a period of time as we move through change. So it's actually creating a bit more resilience within the organisation. But back to your point, Councillor Raven, one of the challenges of dealing with this is that when the CEO, or effectively an executive director, comes and brings something to the board, as a board we have to manage any potential conflicts very carefully. So it's something that's going to weigh on our minds. But if there's something there that, for instance, say it's a CEO's salary or something like that, they actually have to exclude themselves. So managing those conflicts is a bit like being a councillor in some of these situations where you've got to make a call as to whether you're in or out. So there's going to be a bit more work for us in terms of managing our governance. But overall, we think that flexibility of a small, lean organisation, of having the ability for directors to move in and become an exec director at times would be beneficial. And they're beneficial for Invest Logan, and therefore beneficial for, obviously, our shareholder. So I hope that covers off on some of those things. Yeah.
It does, I guess. From a councillor's point of view, if we have a conflict of interest, we can't be involved in any part of the decision-making process or have any influence whatsoever on people who might make decisions, which is why I think it stands out as unusual that you'd have like a staff member, a senior staff member, who would obviously work intimately with creating reports and recommendations to the board, then sitting on that board which makes decisions. Like, you're always going to want to see your decision get up. It's just human nature. It just seems like there's risk to the shareholder that the perception of having a decision maker on the board who is also the creator of the reports that the board is considering is a conflict that can't really be reconciled. Like, you're always going to have to exclude yourself just about, or at least declare that you've got that conflict constantly. It just seems like the benefit is marginal, which is, although your wealth of experience, Mehdi, is extreme, and I understand that is a huge benefit to any board to have you on there, but that you are already providing that experience through your position as CEO in the organisation. So it's not like we're losing that skill set. I think, it seems like minimal benefit with a bit of risk and a lot of extra work. You say it's a little bit of extra work, but managing conflicts of interest are a big deal and they are very time consuming. I guess the only other question before I go to Councillor Bennon is, if you're an executive director, does that mean you get you get the pay packet for being on the board and the CEO?
Yes, you do. Yep.
So you're not saving the org money either. Like, the lean organisation aspect, if you could find a board member who's nearly as good as Mehdi, then it'd still cost you the same, essentially.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, and it's not about that. It's more about our resilience. So, because, like I said, we've got 4 directors. We've got how many staff? 4 staff at the moment. When one of those staff members moves on or changes, we're just finding it that as an organisation, it's challenging, and so it'd be much easier if we could move one of those directors to become an exec director for that period of time while we're moving through a period. But look, as we've said, there are costs and benefits to something like this. We're also as a board, highly attuned to the fact that our organisation is a public organisation. Our shareholder is the council, and so we've always stressed through our whole existence is that we want to be transparent, we're open. Everything we do has got to be, fully open and transparent. And so if there are reservations, we understand that. We think they're manageable, but we, obviously we respect the position of the shareholder on that.
Thank you. Councillor Bannon.
Thank you. Through the Chair, I'm sort of on the lines of Councillor Lane, that if it was a governance decision to change it, I don't understand why we haven't waited for the governance to make the next decision. Like, why are we making the decision of the governance? We're sort of going against that. I don't understand why we couldn't have waited for that. Is there a reason?
So, just to be clear, we're still waiting on council, on ELT, to provide feedback on the decision, and it sounds like councillors want to defer that decision until they've got that advice.
That's correct.
But I'm seeing nods around the room.
Probably the question, through the Chair, probably the question was, why didn't we just wait for that? Why has this come before? We've put their horse before the cart. I don't know why.
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, through the Chair, the recent other changes to the Constitution, so the Constitution is changed at the discretion of the Invest Logan board. So at that time there was, an acceptance by that council that they would be led by the Invest Logan board in that regard. What I'm hearing now is that you would like to see that reviewed at a governance branch level. I'm happy to facilitate that, but it just hasn't been consistent with the approach we've taken to date. So now I'm hearing you'd like to take a different approach. Can I just ask, there's been a little bit of conversation around what the internal processes of Invest Logan will be to manage these perceived conflicts or otherwise. So it's one thing for us to do a pure review, legal review on the constitutional changes themselves. Would you also like to see what the internal mechanisms of Invest Logan are? That's fine. I can capture all that and we can work with Invest Logan.
Do you need a motion to that effect, Dave? Sorry, Director Hanson. No. Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions on the Constitution? Councillor Bradley.
If I may, I'd like to ask a question in confidential that's in part of the confidential report.
Yep, when we get into confidential, we will do exactly that. I just want to make sure there's no further questions for the Constitution open. Excellent. I note that item 4.1 has a confidential report and presentation, and that it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as the details and attachments to the report and the deputation PowerPoint are confidential and commercial in confidence. Do any councillors have any? Do councillors wish to move into closed session? Yes. And do you have any conflicts of interest you'd like to declare before we move in? Excellent. There being none, Councillor Bradley has moved us into confidential. Would someone like to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Stemp. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. The meeting is now closed to the public. Please be advised that the meeting is now in confidential session, and therefore the recording of this meeting, the visual recording of this meeting, if we've got it back up, will be suspended. Audio recording will continue as per the motion earlier. Thank you, councillors. We've now returned to open session. There are some motions on the board, and first I need someone to move that the confidential PowerPoint presented by Invest Logan be tabled as a confidential attachment to the report. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. We'll now move to the recommendations in the report, noting that I've asked for the acceptance of the constitutional changes to be deferred to a future Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting for further consideration. Would someone like to move the motions on the board? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Seconded by Councillor Bannon. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you to Invest Logan for coming in and providing that presentation. It was very informative and helpful, and thanks for enduring our questions. I know they can be a bit persistent sometimes.
Look, through you, Chair, and councillors, look, thank you for the opportunity. I was reflecting on the way over that Invest Logan's actually only been in existence now for a little over, I think, about 3.5 years. I think it's always important that we reflect on what we're achieving and what we're trying to achieve as a tool, as an instrument of council. And you've seen from the great work that the team's done to date that one of our initial tasks was to pick up unused council land to look at its a better use and to try and create some benefit for the community. And I think you can see that's now coming through. It's a process that I think a lot of us would like to see happening more quickly. But I tell you what, from a commercial point of view, that this is happening very quickly. And this year you're seeing some significant dividends, not only for Invest Logan and also you as the shareholder, but also for the Logan community. So we're very excited about the next 12 months, and we're very excited about working with you as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and we're looking forward to being able to brag openly about what a good job you're doing. Don't worry, we will. Well, I will. I can't speak on behalf of my colleagues. Thank you very much, and we'll move on to item 4.2 now, councillors, which is the urban art strategy. Before we move into discussion, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare on this item? There being none, I'll now give people a moment to sit in their seats. And I'll now refer to the Manager for Economic Development and Strategy, Mr. David Bradich, to speak to his report.
Through the Chair, thanks for your time today, and it's good to hear Invest Logan and what they've done with their urban art on their building. It's certainly quite a striking piece that's stimulating a few conversations within the community. Today, Council, we ask for you to endorse us to have a conversation with the community about urban art. We have been delivering urban art as part of our summit work, so some of you may or may not be aware, but the discs in Beenleigh, the design within those discs are designed by local artists. We have delivered urban design and urban art as part of the footpath that links Wembley Road through to the train station. There is urban art on the floor of that path, which is meant to demonstrate the diversity of our community, where we have a number of flags that are stenciled into the ground. So we are delivering urban art as part of the capital works associated with the summit work, but we feel that we need a framework and we feel we need a conversation with the community. So I'll hand over to Ella, who will describe the strategy itself.
Through the Chair, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Now, from the City Centre Summits, it was clear that more vibrancy, street art, creative lighting and activation of Logan's activity centres were identified as key priorities for the community. So the purpose of this strategy is to develop a framework for the implementation of urban art projects in our activity centres to improve the amenity, to attract more people to our city centres, and to activate some of those disused spaces. Now, as part of the strategy, we also looked at what is urban art. So it's more than just public art. It is a place-based creative practice which enhances our built and our natural environments and add value to our urban character and our cultural identity of our city. So it involves a diverse range of art forms, creative interventions, production methods, and design applications for establishing not only permanent but also temporary outcomes in our centres. So it's more a broader term than just public art. It includes placemaking collaborations and outcomes such as creative signage, interpretive signage, integrated furniture design, and Dave has made reference to some of those projects we're already implementing, creative lighting, bespoke playscapes, place activations, and public artwork and installations, whether they're temporary or permanent installations. So the vision will be achieved through 5 strategy objectives, which links to an action plan. And it also recommends the establishment of an urban art working group, which includes a number of key branches in our council who all already collaboratively work on these projects. We've also identified various commission models to deliver these projects. There's not one way to deliver urban art, and it's important to see the work of Invest Logan, for example, to deliver some really great artwork in our city. For each of our activity centres, we've identified a curatorial framework and place-focused urban art opportunities. But it's important to understand that these are not exclusive. So it's not to say that if a project's not identified, it cannot happen. And some of these projects can be transferred to other places across our city. It just gives a sense of what are some of these kind of outcomes we can achieve across our city. It's also important to note that this strategy does not represent a commitment from council to fund these projects by other developers, by council or other stakeholders. There's various opportunities to fund some of these projects through government grants, including them in our delivery of infrastructure projects. So as part of streetscape or parks, there's various opportunities to entrench art in our projects, and that can all realise the eventual delivery of these projects. At this stage, we're not identifying specific timeframes, so it's really giving a sense of what are some of these opportunities that exist across our city. We have consulted with the community and throughout council in the delivery of and putting together this strategy. So we've undertaken a number of interviews across council. We've had a briefing with all the elected officials, some elected officials. We had one-on-one interviews. We had a focus group with local artists. And we also had a Have Your Say where we sought input from the community on what would they like to see. And the outcomes of this consultation determined why urban art is important. What kind of projects should we have as urban art projects? Where should we have these urban art projects? And how can we deliver these projects? So the recommendation of this report is to take this draft strategy out to the community, to consult with them. We'll put it out on Have Your Say, get the input from the community, and then come back with a final strategy for council endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. I'd just like to note that the live stream has begun, so councillors can smile at the camera when they look that way. I have councillors Lane, Stemp, Bradley, Karansky, Bannon and Murphy. Councillor Lane, you may open the batting.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair, through you. Ella, I'd just like to say that I appreciate all of the work that you do to try and introduce a bit of beautiful colour to our world. I was looking through this report and I thought, wow, there are some really beautiful options throughout the areas. And I looked at Division 2s and I thought, it's a bit average. But then I realised that you've actually been working very hard on trying to come up with a plan that suited the business, myself and the community, and we're still not there yet. And that's okay. I think the community consultation is such an important part of community art. I looked at the red spinner and I thought, my goodness, we don't want that in Division 2, not ever, not at all. And then I looked at some of the lighting projects that are proposed throughout the community, and I really enjoyed the aesthetics of them, and I thought that we could greatly benefit. We've been talking about Division 2 being on the train line and being that driver for nighttime economy between Woodridge Station, the Kingston Butter Factory and Kingston Station and Meadowbrook. And I think that we can come up with some really great ideas that bring along the community with us. I don't know that geometric shapes and very bold metal chairs are the way to go. I think we're a warm community and we should really reflect that. So when we're doing community consultations in the future, I'll be so proud to stand next to you and actually take that feedback from local residents, so that I don't know all of their thoughts, but I certainly would be keen to hear what they've got to say about the plans that you've got moving forward. So thank you for your hard work. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Mr Chair. So firstly, I'd like to say there's some really exciting ideas in here. I'm very supportive of the arts, and any support to local artists is absolutely amazing. It'll be really interesting to see what happens when you go out to community consultation. I'm really interested to see what the feedback will be like from the community. You touched on my question regarding funding options, because I think the community will probably ask you that question as to how these are likely to be funded. Just curious, in terms of prioritisation, obviously it's a big city, you've got various projects in various divisions. Is there any plan on how they're likely to be prioritised, please?
Through the chair. So we have the city centre implementation plans, and ideally we also would be looking at developing some implementation plans for those centres which we haven't done so yet. So the idea is to prioritise these projects and develop a model through the work the place management team does into the future to how can we equally spread the projects through the city, and then also working out a bit of a system as to, and similarly we've done the same with the summit projects, where we be guided by the community in terms of where the priorities lie, and that then gets factored into where we focus the key initiatives and which projects get developed before another one. And it may come down to cost, it may come down to the stakeholders involved, and also sometimes the community takes the lead on delivery of the projects, or a developer that may bring forward the projects, and then where council fund these projects, there will be a different methodology put in place to prioritise projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stemp. And as soon as my speaking notes come back up, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. Ella, thank you so much for the presentation. Sorry, I don't know your surname, so I can't refer to you.
Duplessis.
Beg your pardon, my apologies. I suppose I've given feedback previously about Slacks Creek being included in Springwood. They're two different areas, and I really can't understand the rationale for including them here. I would like to see them separated going forward. On page 103, you can actually remove number 3, because TMR have come back and said that can't happen. They're actually replacing that bridge apparently. So that was actually going to be funded out of Division 1's LIP, that lighting project, and unfortunately that cannot happen, so you can remove that one. I do very much look forward to hearing what the community have to say about the Springwood Rochdale Road. I'd like to see what you've got on the next page on 104. That looks pretty amazing from France. I think that would be a really iconic sort of feature in Springwood. In relation to Carroll Avenue, Paxton Street, etc., there's already a Division 1 LIP project that is funding that. So I'm not sure whether you need to take that on board and maybe think of other things that could be included, because they're already going to happen, they're already funded, and they're already in place.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley.
Can I hear the...
Yeah, I was just about to ask Dave specifically to respond to your first question, which was around the separation of Slacks Creek and Springwood. Do you want to speak to that? Mr. Radich?
Through the chair. So we have, so while the summit did include both of those areas, they are geographically different, and I do understand your feelings on that, and I believe the Divisional Councillor for Slacks Creek always shares a similar view. So from public art point of view, I don't see Slacks Creek as having the same as Springwood. It's a different sort of makeup, and there is future planning in the pipeline to clearly delineate the Slacks Creek from Springwood.
Through the chair, may I ask, can you respond to what I've said about removing some stuff, and is it possible to think of some other things?
Through the chair, so this is all part of the draft policy. We can amend it, we can talk to you again about what you would like to see in and out. That offer is for every councillor here too, so come and speak to us if you've got any specific concerns or comments, things that you want to see in. If you want to start talking to us about a mural in your area, come start talking to us about it. It's a piece that we can start having the conversation around the importance of public art, and it's really rewarding to see in the draft corporate plan that there is a focus on placemaking, and public art gives a sense of community for place. So it's good to see that.
Thank you, Mr. Radich. Councillor Karansky, Bannon, Murphy, Wilcox, Hall, Power.
I'd just like to say I absolutely love this report. I was really, really excited to see it come up. From a councillor perspective, often we're looking at trying to fund a piece of public art through our formerly DISIP and now LIP funding, and as much as I love it, unfortunately the other needs are normally screaming louder, so they're the kinds of things that, for me at least, fall through the cracks. Just a couple of comments. I noticed Yarrabilba got a bit of a run in here with the public art that they have there. And I read in your report whether we look at a mechanism where developers contribute to funding public art. And of course, Lendlease have had to in that example. And I think it's a really great example of how they've rolled it out. It feels somewhat seamless down there. And the residents were involved in that consultation process of what would go where and what that would look like. So the upshot of that is there's real ownership over that art. And it is quite different to other art pieces in the city. So it does actually give Yarrabilba a bit of its own tone and flavour. Certainly, like the big letters out the front, they're kind of striking when you first go in there. And I think I mentioned it the other day for Reconciliation Week and so on. We'll be decorating those letters. So, public art really has, I believe, a really valuable place in community placemaking. So, I was thrilled to see this come up, but I'm also interested that you're trying to tie it to how can we afford it? How can we make it happen? How can there be economic drivers behind that? So I really welcome that. I think the community will really get on board with this. With regard to Logan Village, just as a quick one, I think Lucy might have forwarded you an email already, but the local RSL are absolutely loving the work that was done with regard to Anzac Day and the sandstone plinths and so on, and they have a vision for a light horse monument sitting on one of those plinths. So if you could please integrate that into your thinking. But yeah, completely have my support on this one. And apparently there's a big bass in Logan Village that I've got to go and discover that I didn't even know was out there yet. So, but no, I absolutely love it. I think the community will receive it really well, and I think it's smart to tie it to placemaking and the City Summits work as well. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Karansky, for your absence of a question. Councillor Bannon.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll be quick. I just want to say it's awesome. Every time you bring something through, there's so much positivity in the room. We deal with a lot of negative stuff and complaints and tricky subjects, but everything this is just, I'm not going to pick them. Everything's just incredibly positive. It's very refreshing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Bannon. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Ella and Dave, for bringing this report. You know my feelings with regards to local art, and we have plenty of local artists down in our area, and it does connect and activate areas. Perfect examples is Invest Logan mural, which we've got people talking about, the Slade Solutions. However, I have got a disappointment in page 114 when you're looking at the town square. I'm really disappointed about this with the town square Tree of Life sponsor board. The report says that it needs to be refreshed. I can't understand this. This project was done by a community group. It has family history. It raised over $24,000 for the local community that went back into the local community. It was done by a well-known local artist, and here we are talking about painting over it or putting a vinyl wrap. What more community work do you want? I'm really disappointed about that piece, but and that's something that I think you could talk to me about with regards to that one. If you were to go and to change that piece of art, I'm absolutely positive that 100 of the local families that bought sponsorship on there would be really disappointed, not only, and quota as well. So other than that, art is the key to connect things, and I'm well supportive of the report other than that little tiny bit. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that, Ella, or are you happy to take it offline?
Through the chair, happy to take that offline with Councillor Murphy, but I believe the intent there was to protect the artwork because it was being vandalised. So really looking at a way that we can better protect it through a screen or something to make sure that people don't destroy the art, so that it can be protected for the people that delivered it.
Thank you very much. Does that reassure you a little bit, Councillor? No? There we go. Councillor Wilcox. Oh, you want to respond? Sure.
The report says that new artwork design should be expressing the heartbeat of Beenleigh, and that First Nations artists should have a look at this site. So, yeah, I don't think it says anything about protecting it. I'd be very disappointed if this piece of artwork goes.
Happy to take that on board as part of the feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Just a question. Do we have a current map of our Logan Street art? Because we do have some street art. I know Division 11 has it on a few buildings, and the old light poles, telegraph poles, power poles and that sort of thing. Do we have a current list at all?
Through the chair, happy to come back. I believe the Libraries and Creative Industries branch do keep a record. They're the custodians of all public art assets, and I believe they would have a register of all artworks.
Because I think it would be great if we had one, because we could use it as part of a tourism strategy to get people to come out into Logan City and come and look at these things and that sort of thing. Because I know in the school holidays I'm going to go on a bit of a driving tour. I'm going to go to Toowoomba, and one of the things I want to do in Toowoomba is go and look at the street art and stuff like that that's up there. And I've been Googling it, and it's on a couple of different websites and that, but Logan isn't mentioned at all in any of these sites for any of our street art and stuff. And just very quickly on the Greater Flagstone one, I would welcome that going to community consult before anything is done, because I'm not really a fan. I did see lots of other things that I liked, but I'm not really a fan of what was in there for Greater Flagstone at the moment. I'm pretty sure the community would love to have their say. But all in all, it's well put together, and I like the thought of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, overall, I'm pretty pleased with this report. What I would probably like to see is perhaps a bit more engagement with the youth. I think it's pretty important that the youth be involved in this, because usually the youth are the ones that will protect those assets. If anyone graffitis them, they'll be quick to call out who's doing it, simply because they were involved with the process of creating the designs. And I think it will also lead to them having some kind of expression within our city, which is very hard to do in many cities. Not only that, but they will grow up around these things, and it kind of sets part of their identity with the city, you know. And when you've developed an attachment to the identity of the city, you tend to want to stay in that city because you get a sense of belonging, and I think that's very important for us to create. Another thing is, I'd love to see a lot of input from our First Nations into specific areas. You know, to be able to tell the stories of those areas through the artwork is fairly important for them, I believe. So I would like to see some of that. So probably a bit more engagement in terms of how we involve our youth in our schools, as well as our First Nations, and that's my only suggestion.
Thank you for your feedback, Councillor Hall. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Through the chair, my hand went up when Councillor Wilcox spoke about the trail. So one of the projects for Springwood does actually have a trail, and there's historical significance there as well. I do want to give also feedback. I do actually overall love what you've actually presented. Just I want to make sure that that is expressed to you, and I would like to meet, if that's okay, to give my feedback of possible ones to be included. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I'll let the Mayor close and then we'll move the report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. Just want to state that I love public art, and I concur with some of the sentiments that has been put forward. I just want to question, was this strategy actually given to the councillors before the committee? Because I never saw it until...
We had a briefing on it, Mr Mayor.
You had a briefing on it? That
Yep.
might have been the briefing I missed. Okay, that's fine. I just want to say one thing, that it can be very satisfying, but it also can be very politically dangerous. I have seen over the years councillors come under a lot of grief politically. Maybe they get it wrong, or just the cost of public art can be perceived by residents is a little bit extreme, but they don't take into context that that piece of artwork could be there for 20, 50, 100 years. In a lot of cases, a lot of the artwork might have been very expensive at the time. And I'll give you an example. At the front of this report, you've got a photo of a tree with the kookaburras on it. I think it was about $5,000 in about 2004. $5,000 was a lot of money in those days, but nowadays it's not a lot of money at all, and we've still got that asset. But just be very wary that it can be a political bomb, and you can incur a lot of criticism if you get it wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The appreciation of art is always very subjective. Councillor Hall, do you have something to add, or are you just picking a fight with the Mayor?
Only a little bit of a fight with the Mayor.
So that's a yes.
I would like to say that there have been other artworks that have been politically dangerous. The Sydney Opera House was considered politically dangerous. But when you think about it in the long run, what is Australia identified with? You know, whenever we're represented in a movie, what do? They show a picture of the Sydney Opera House and automatically the whole world goes, Australia. Wouldn't it be amazing if Logan was identified for its art and people would show some of our work and they'd automatically say, wow, Logan. That's all.
We do have that mural of Wolverine out near the Mount Lindsay Highway. Oh, I just got to see controversial already.
I love the Wolverine.
The report has been moved by Councillor Kransky. Thank you very much. And who would like to second this report? Oh, thank you, Councillor Stemp. You were fastest on the gun. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Councillors, we'll now move on to item 4.3, which is the amendment to the schedule of works for the proposed local government infrastructure plan. I note that it is a confidential report. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? I note that item 4.3 is confidential because it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as it involves discussion of information that is not yet publicly available and relates to the financial operation of council. Do any councillors wish to move into confidential on this report? Are you happy to accept it and move it? Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah? Would you like to move us into confidential, Councillor Bradley? Councillor Bradley has moved that we go into closed session. Would someone like to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Herrenmeyer. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Bannon. Are you against going into confidential on this one, or are you just abstaining? Abstain? Got that noted? Thank you very much. Councillors, we're now in closed session, and please be advised that the live streaming of the meeting will be suspended until it reopens, but confidential audio recording will continue. Councillors, you have a motion on the screen for this item. Would somebody like to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Hall. Seconded by Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillors, that brings us to the...
I abstain.
You abstain?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilcox. That brings us to the end of the Economic Development and Strategy Manager's reports. Dave, do you have any GB for us? Councillors, do you have any GB for Mr. Radich? No, thank you very much. Councillors, there are no reports from the Development and Assessment Manager, Stephen Ball, this month because he's so busy delivering on outcomes. Does anyone have any general business for Stephen? Stephen, do you have any general business for us?
Through the chair, no, I don't.
Thank you very much. You can get back to work. We'll now move on to the reports of the Health, Environment and Waste Manager, Mr. Michael Asnikar. That is item 5.1, the Queensland Climate Resilience Council's Climate Resilience Alliance Pilot Project Grant, and that is not a mouthful at all. Before we move into discussions, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare on this item? Excellent. I'll now hand over to Mr. Asnikar to speak to his report.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, councillors.
Council's been offered the opportunity to accept a $100,000 grant from the LGAQ to lead a pilot project for the establishment of a SEQ Regional Climate Resilience Alliance. A number of SEQ councils are developing strategies and undertaking various internal and community programs to build climate change awareness and resilience in their communities. This pilot project aims to bring interested SEQ councils together to identify opportunities to work collaboratively on initiatives. With the recent release of its climate resilience policy and strategy, Logan City Council is emerging as a local government leader in this area, and the offer and acceptance of this grant funding is, I think, a recognition of Council's leadership. Currently, 4 councils have expressed interest in being part of the project, including Brisbane, Ipswich, Sunshine Coast and Noosa. However, invitations would be extended to other SEQ councils should council support accepting this grant funding. The funding would support the engagement of a dedicated project manager whose primary focus over the next 12 months will be to review how council climate alliances have worked in other states and their applicability in SEQ, and to develop a framework that all SEQ councils could use to engage with their communities on climate change issues, including practical measures to raise awareness of climate change risks and what they can do to minimise carbon emissions. The outcome of this pilot would be reported back to Council, LGAQ, and of course shared with other Queensland councils. This report seeks Council's endorsement to accept this grant funding opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Asnikar. I have a question from Councillor Lane.
So mine's a comment first, which is congratulations that Council's Environment section is doing such great work that you're actually approached. So that's a good reflection of your team, and congratulations to all of them. My question actually relates to this membership group, and my concerns relate to smaller councils. If we have initiatives moving forward, our biosolids projects and things like that, we tend to look at the smaller councils and see what we can do to assist. Would that be something you would actively seek to do as part of this consortium?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand that the membership of this group is for South East Queensland. Trevor will correct me if I'm wrong on that. Trevor?
That is correct, but yeah, we would certainly welcome the smaller councils within the region to come onto the alliance.
Thanks very much for that. In speaking with some of the councils on some of the infrastructure work that we've been doing with the Mayor from Townsville, I think that they appreciate any advice on environmental issues and environmental mitigation projects that you guys are working on that they can take on board. They're obviously smaller, they don't have the same base as we do, and they're starting behind the 8 ball. So when you've got an innovative team that is coming up with great ideas that are sharing, I think if we share Queensland-wide, that just makes us stronger.
And certainly the intent of this is to undertake a pilot project. It's through the LGAQ, so obviously the outcomes of that will be shared across Queensland councils. And there are also other alliances being formed in various capacities in the north and central parts of Queensland as well.
Trevor looks like he wants to say something.
We've muted him.
Sorry, through the chair. Certainly, just Councillor Lane, if you wanted to flick any contacts onto us, we would be more than happy to showcase the work that Logan City is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Through the chair, I am 100% supportive of this, and I'm just wondering, going forward though, can you give us an idea of what sort of things you would be looking at? Because when I met with the state member for Springwood just recently, we were talking about solar, really getting into solar infrastructure and including that in our planning scheme maybe, and different ideas for around the division, etc. And I'm just wondering, what sort of things would you be looking at?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's probably the work of the Alliance will actually start to identify some of those things, because different councils are looking at a whole range of different activities and support that they can undertake. So internally for a start, so what council itself can do to minimise its own carbon emissions reduce their climate impact, and also look at their own risks. But from a community perspective, I think after we sort of get our own activities in order and have a plan there, it's how we can support the community. So through various education, awareness and promo. So whether that is solar or assisting them understanding the risks, or getting a bit of a community of practice happening, or promoting business type information around low carbon and potential financial savings. So there's a whole suite of different ideas and activities that are happening. This is about collating and corralling all that into a toolkit and a framework that becomes useful for all councils to use in their individual communities in whatever way works best for them.
If I can just elaborate as well, will it also include possible business ventures that, or possible opportunities? For example, solar panels have been around for a long time, but there's no one actually recycling them, and there's no business actually dealing with the end product, because they only last for a certain amount of time. So will it sort of tap into those sort of things, business opportunities?
There's no reason why not. It's certainly solar panels are emerging as, I think, under the category of problematic waste streams that, you know, local governments across Australia are starting to see more and more of, and establishing viable recycling and reuse for that particular waste stream is high on the agenda for local governments. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Any further questions on this one, councillors? Would someone like to move the recommendation of the report, please? Thank you, Councillor Bradley, seconded by Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. We'll now move on to item 5.2, the review of the Logan Eco Forum and environmental engagement activities. Before I move into discussion, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare on this item? There being none, Mr. Asnakai, you can speak to your report.
Thanks, Chair. Late last year, Council resolved to undertake a review of what is currently its biennial EnviroForum event, as well as investigating options more broadly on the way in which it engages with the community on environmental matters. We sought feedback from the community through a Have Your Say survey, which was advertised widely across the community and attracted nearly 300 responses. And we also considered the feedback that was received through the community visioning process. That also attracted a lot of comments in relation to natural environment. In terms of the themes that emerged regarding engagement preferences from the community, included that the frequency of the Eco Forum event be increased to annually instead of every 2 years, and that it be held in conjunction with the annual LEAF event. That the Eco Forum itself showcase the latest innovations and research on environmental matters, with the opportunity for Q&A from the participants with expert speakers. That the LEAF event be continued, so a lot of support for that event. That Council also conduct an annual community environmental survey regarding topical issues to allow the community to inform and influence Council decisions. And finally, to continue the delivery of our current face-to-face environmental activities and events, but look at opportunities for complementing that with a series of online type events, which was of interest particularly to younger people. So in response to all that feedback, we're in a position to accommodate those those themes, and our recommendation to Council through the report is to continue the annual LEAF event, continue the face-to-face environmental activity and education activities, such as our workshops and guided walks, that we do host the Eco Forum annually in conjunction with LEAF. Unfortunately, we can't organise that between now and Sunday for this year's, but we'll start that from next year. that we undertake an annual community environmental survey and develop some online environmental events and activities. And in relation to those last 2 points, that we undertake some further work and perhaps some further engagement with young people around what specifically those 2 things could look like to meet the expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I've got Councillor Lane, Stemp and Bradley. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, and thanks for this report. I would love to see it attached to the LEAF program. I think anything that sells, environmental credentials and ideas and things to local residents that they can take on, maybe even bastardise a little bit at home and actually utilise some of those ideas is a great thing. It's also a great way for the environmental team to learn what locals are doing in their own home, so they can actually talk face to face in a very comfortable setting. So I really appreciate the idea of co-locating it with the LEAF Festival. One of the things is when you're talking about the community consultation and community facilitation with programs going forward, is that part of, a good example is seniors love gardening, they love environmental protection things, the worm farms and what have you. Are we working with communities to engage in local programs that can be done throughout the community centres as a regular feature there? Did that make sense, my question?
Through the chair. Certainly. So yes, we definitely engage with community services and linking into those networks and utilising the skills and knowledge in the community. So for an example is the group out at Eagleby Wetlands have actually helped facilitate the guided walks around that with us, and linking into that community network is very important.
But just to add to that, I think Councillor Lane, you might be also suggesting that if there are established community groups, maybe offering those established groups the opportunity to, be offered a particular activity that might be of interest to their
Marvellous
to
Mature
their
Women Gardening
group.
Club. We've got a lot of groups that meet, and they're quite substantial in size.
Yeah, and through our waste education program, not just the environmental activity program, certainly through the waste program, we do approach those specific groups, schools, seniors, and no problems.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to mention I actually attended this Eco Forum event in 2019. It was a great event, and I really learnt a lot, met some amazing people, including Tony Sharp, who I'd never met from Substation 33 until that day, which was great. I'd like to know, if not now, what feedback came out of those 2 forums, which has now been implemented by Council? I guess there was a lot of workshops and things we did during that time, and I believe that there's some things that have obviously come to pass or are in progress. I'd love to get a bit of an understanding of what things maybe have progressed since those forums. And obviously, as you mentioned, I'd like to see more youth involved in the feedback, which you've already mentioned that you'll improve. And in relation to holding as part of LEAF, I'd love to see it maybe on another day, like as part of the event, because most of those people would want to be involved in all the things that are involved that LEAF has on that main day. So that's just a bit more feedback to provide.
So just to respond to that, through you, Chair. So the details around how and when we host that Eco Forum in conjunction with LEAF, whether it's on the Saturday and LEAF on the Sunday, so that's the sort of detail that we now need to drill down into. We certainly received and asked for feedback on the Eco Forum events that we've had previously, so I'm sure we could probably collate that feedback in terms of themes and provide that. And certainly all that feedback that we receive, not just through Eco Forum feedback, but all the events that we run, all feed into and inform our program of natural environment activity, work, strategy. So there's obviously a broad suite of subject matter there, whether it's waterways, native animals, endangered plants, climate. So it's all there, and it's a very rich source of data from which we extract the work. Sorry, was there a third question?
I guess it's just really great that the community know that when they provide their feedback that they can sort of see. I mean, I know we make a lot of decisions based on that, and it's just important that we feed that back to the community so that they know that we're listening. I guess that's what I was trying to make. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Stem. I've got Councillor Bradley, then Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, through the chair. Mr Asnicar, thank you so much for this report and for engaging as well in getting that feedback. I'm really very, very grateful. As you know, I'm very passionate about this area. So, and having been involved right from the inception of it, I am extremely grateful that it's evolved into this, so thank you. I can't remember what I put my hand up for now, sorry, I just had a mental block. The LEAF is always run around World Environment Day, and I noticed that Councillor Stamp suggested something else. How can that be incorporated? In what way?
I think that, well, the something else was really referring to that eco forum that we've historically held later in the year.
Yep.
So it was about co-timing that with the LEAF event. So LEAF is traditionally on a Sunday,
yes,
around World Environment Day. So we look to host the eco forum event perhaps on the Saturday before the Sunday or the Sunday morning. Again, I think we just need to do a little bit more engagement and research around exactly how and when we host that in conjunction with LEAF.
Okay, thank you. And I'm happy to move it when it gets to that time, but I want to thank you also for engaging with Springdale Garden Club. Really very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Previously, before I became a councillor, I actually didn't know about the Eco Forum, but I did know about LEAF. So I think it would be good if you actually incorporated them both so that the community knows and gets a bit more education around it and that sort of thing. Because I didn't know about the Logan Environmental Conservation Partnerships Day as well, which is held in my division, and I've lived there for 18 years and didn't know about it. But when you look through the feedback and stuff that you're reading in here, and you've got why you haven't participated in the Eco Forum, you got quite a few respondents that said they didn't know about it and that sort of thing. So just wondering how you've engaged the community to make sure that they do know about it, because I know that digitally, yes, it's out there now, and I'm sure that we all as councillors have been sharing the LEAF for this weekend and that sort of thing. But is there any posters or flyers that you've done up for either of the forums and that sort of thing? Because I know that I've got a bunch of shop fronts and stuff that I'm sure would actually have loved to have had a poster that they could have put up in their shop, even though it's, you know, not in their area. Or for the Partnerships Day, they probably would have loved to have had a poster up to promote it and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Trevor might have a better recollection of the specifics around the promo. Certainly all of the online and the socials and that would have been done, but beyond that.
So with the Eco Forum in the past, it was promoted through all the usual networks that we use, which included in print newspaper, as well as on social media and through the council website and events listings and things like that. Posters, we can certainly provide posters where they are requested, and certainly with the Environmental Conservation Partnerships Day, that is, just to clarify, rotated around different areas of the city. It's not always held in the same place each year. This year it is in your division. But certainly, where it is open to the public, it had to be closed only to the members only during the COVID restrictions. But certainly when it is opened up, it is through a targeted promotion in particular areas that would benefit the most from that. And again, certainly to look at providing posters where they're requested.
Be great. And then when do you conduct the annual community environmental survey? Is that after all of these events so that you get the feedback that you require and that sort of thing?
So that will be a new initiative.
Okay.
And we will need to decide the best timing for that in conjunction with marketing.
Perfect, because it would be good after all of the events have been held and that sort of thing, so you're getting the targeted events, and then we can all push it out there to our community and that sort of thing. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Hall.
Thank you through the chair. Leaf is extremely popular, especially with the residents in my constituency. And I think actually combining the days would be of great benefit because what you'll find is a lot of people with kids are fairly busy, but they will make time to go somewhere if their children are involved. But what that would do would also provide something for the adults to be part of, while the kids are having fun. I think Leaf is very important, so we need to keep that going. I remember as a young person, there was a lot out there, but the only thing that really took my interest was probably Captain Planet, which probably didn't have much in the way of what I could actually do to save the environment. It was more about just summoning someone, whereas Leaf actually, Dirt World and whatnot, teaches kids what they can do to actually, help preserve the environment and help make our world green. So I think actually combining the days would probably would attract a lot more people to the forum than actually having it on separate days, because I think parents will actually take their kids to Leaf and then themselves have an opportunity to partake in that forum.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I'll take that as a comment. Are there any further questions, councillors? If not, Councillor Bradley has moved the report. Would someone like to second the report? Thank you, Councillor Stemp. Too late, too slow, mate. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously, noting that the Mayor is not in the room. Councillors, the next report on the agenda is item 5.3, which is the COVID-19 vaccination service provider contract. Before I move into discussion, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare on this matter? There being none. It is a confidential report, but Michael would like to speak to it openly before I ask if we need to move into confidential. I'll put that question after he's spoken to the report. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just would like to speak to it in the public forum. The contract itself is confidential, but I can certainly give an understanding, a context of the type of contract that this is. Just so, by way of background, Council's been providing a community vaccination service since 1979, and it's a service which is highly valued by the community and which has established Council as a professional service provider. Given Council's experience and track record as a provider of immunisation services in Logan and surrounding areas, earlier this year Queensland Health invited Council to submit an expression of interest to be a potential provider of COVID vaccinations in the future. After the assessment of Council's expression of interest, Queensland Health has now invited Council to enter into a contract which would result in Council being included on a panel of potential providers to deliver COVID vaccines. Queensland Health may subsequently invite those on their panel of providers to consider offering their service to deliver the COVID vaccines as the vaccine rollout moves through its various stages. When specific service requirements are provided by Queensland Health, Council can then consider whether it has the capability and capacity to assist. Council has a professional and experienced immunisation team, and subject to Council's consideration of this report, the team does stand ready to support Queensland Health with future COVID vaccination delivery to the extent that we reasonably can.
Councillor Lane has a question. Is that a question in regards to the comments that Mr Asnakaris just made? I.e. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. If you were to proceed with your the interest, do you know whether that would then move the vaccinations out of the hospital into the, given that we do vaccinations as a general rule, would it follow along similar lines where the hospital then, I know that they started vaccinating at 8:30 this morning out of the hospital for my age group. I'm just curious as to whether or not you have any information around that.
Yeah, just the general comment in relation to the specifics. Council's really not in a position to be able to answer that. That's really questions for Queensland Health. We're simply a potential service provider, and we need to understand what the service requirements of Queensland Health may be in the future for us to consider our future involvement. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And given that we, Council has done the vaccination program for multiple vaccinations over many years and has fully qualified people that can do the vaccinations, anyone who had a concern about vaccinating in this particular instance would have an alternative, most likely, that they could pursue through their doctor and what have you. Couldn't they?
Well, that's right. There's a range of service provision options out there. So if and when council becomes one of those, we would just be simply one of a number of different options available to the community.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. I note that item 5.3 is confidential and it's considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as the confidential attachments contains contractual and commercial in confidence information. Do councillors wish to move into confidential, or are you happy to accept the report? About the contract? Okay. Councillor Wilcox has moved us into confidential. Would anyone like to second that motion? Councillor Bradley has seconded the motion. Can I please see a show of hands? That has been carried with the exception of Councillor Bennon, who is against, and Councillor Hall against. Thank you very much, councillors. We'll now move into closed session, and I'll wait for the gallery to clear so that we can commence discussions. On the screen for you to vote on. Would someone like to move this motion, please, once it catches up with me? Thank you. Councillor Bradley, seconded by Councillor Lane. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously, noting the absence of Mayor Power. Councillors, we'll now move on to item 5.4, which is the Sub-Regional Waste Alliance Shortlisted Solutions Evaluation Report. Before we move into open discussions on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, Michael, do you want to speak to this report in open session, or are you happy for me to test if councillors need to move into closed session?
I'm happy to test.
Thank you, Mr. Asnikar. I note that item 5.4 is confidential and it's considered necessary to take this discussion of this report into a closed session as the confidential attachments contain information relating to contracts that may be made by council as well as commercial in confidence information. Do councillors need to move into confidential on this report, or are you happy to accept it as read? I'm just slowing down slightly. I'm speaking too quickly. Woosah. Thank you. You do want to move into confidential? That's okay. This committee will never end. Councillor Bradley has moved us into confidential. Would someone like to second that motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with the exception of Hall and Bannon, who I assume are both against. Thank you very much, councillors, for filling the role that I played last term. We will now move in, Councillor Hall and Bannon are against. Moved by Bradley, seconded by Wilcox. Hall and Bannon. No problems. Councillors, we are now in closed session. Looks like that motion is going to be moved by Councillor Stemp when the ladies are ready. Would someone like to second the motion? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously, noting the Mayor's absence. Councillors, that is the end of the Health, Environment and Waste Managers reports. Mr. Asnikar, do you have any general business for us? Councillor Lane has general business for you.
Thank you very much. My question is around, Trixie Benbrook and her work with the birds. She actually approached me several times asking about Scrubby Creek rehabilitation and what we're doing going forward to encourage birds and natural trees and actually planting the trees that suit the local fauna. I was just wondering whether you could just give us a quick indication of where you're headed with that and what I can do as the Divisional Councillor to help. And given that it's Scrubby Creek and it borders on Division 5 and 6, that would be really handy to share the costs of any ideas you have.
Thank you, through the chair. Absolutely, as you know, we've developed the Scrubby Creek Recovery Plan, and that absolutely identifies some of those key spots for habitat creation and enhancement. The best way to bring birds back is to provide that habitat through that creek and providing those stepping stones and connection. We can go through some of those specific projects with you and the divisional councils specifically, and outline exactly where they're at and future projections on when those projects are expected to be delivered.
That would be lovely, and if we could include the local schools, I'm sure they're very keen. Kingston State School in particular is keen to get on board, as are some of the others, to help with planting and planning of these local areas. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Bradley has GB as well.
Thank you, through the chair. Mr Azakar, as you're probably aware, the Priest Gully rehabilitation has either started or is about to start. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate publicly about what, because it's quite a significant project, what is actually happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, the Priest Gully Restoration Project is a very exciting project, and it is receiving funding through the Resilient Rivers Initiative, as well as some council contribution. The works in terms of temporary fencing and things like that are starting this week, and then there will be some construction works at the end of the week and then going on for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So that will look at stabilising the bank, and then doing a lot of replanting and revegetation with natives that will again provide that habitat for local flora and fauna movement.
I wish to thank the staff sincerely for working quite hard behind the scenes in relation to that, and maybe the chair and I could go out for a photo at some stage, but this has been a long time in the making. I remember being in the task force, or whatever you call it back then, the councillor mayors, and I think it may be about 6-8 years in the making. I'm not sure exactly how many, but I want to sincerely thank the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Great work from everyone. There's no further reports for health, environment and waste. Oh, Mr. Aston,
my apologies,
GB
Mr. Chair. I do have one GB, and it's just a obvious reminder about Leaf this Sunday. Make sure the weather does the right thing by us, and we'll have a great day.
I'll pull some strings with the weather, make sure it works. And it's great to see that glad to see Ms. Moffat back in committee again. Welcome. And you nearly got a chance to use the microphone. We'll try and organise it for next round. Councillors, I'll now move on to item 6.1, which is the only report of the Innovation and City Transformation Directorate. And while they swap over and Dr. Scott comes to the front, item 6.1 is the Digital Infrastructure and Connectivity Report. I note that it is a confidential report. Before we enter into discussions, would any councillors like to declare any conflicts of interest? Nope. Excellent. Dr. Scott, do you want to speak openly to the report before I test if councillors wish to move into confidential?
Happy for you to test, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Councillors, I note that item 6.1 is confidential and is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as the details of the report and the attachment are confidential. Do councillors wish to move into confidential, or are you happy to take this report as read? Excellent. Bear with me while we put a motion on the screen for you. Do you have any questions on this one, Councillor Bradley, or are you happy to take it as read? The Digital Infrastructure and Connectivity Report. Okay. Thank you. Councillors, you have a motion on recommendation on the board. Would someone like to move this recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Bennon. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Karansky.
No, I just can't find a report, but at the moment, so I was trying to refresh my memory what it was.
It's in relation to the $2.5 million we received from the state government and the business case for how we're going
that's
to...
fine. I know what it is. I've read it, I just couldn't remember.
That's all good. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Councillors, do you have any general business for the Director of Innovation and City Transformation? Dr. Scott, do you have any general business for us? Easy. Thank you very much, councillors. The meeting, that brings our committee to a close. The time is 11:20. The Road and Water Infrastructure, the City Infrastructure Committee will begin in 10 minutes at 11:30.